Belgium, a small European country you probably don't think about too often. It's not as dramatic as France, not as rich as Switzerland, and not as flashy as Italy. But this little country, about the size of probably Maryland, is basically the headquarters of Europe. Brussels is the home of the European Union and NATO. Some of the most important political decisions on the planet are made right here. And yet, Belgium itself can barely govern. I'm not exaggerating. Belgium once went 589 days without an elected government, the longest political crisis in modern history. So here's the paradox. How can a country that struggles to run itself be running Europe? That's what we are diving into today. Belgium, the country that runs Europe but can't run itself. When I visited Brussels, the contrast hit me straight away. On one hand, you've got these gleaming glass EU buildings, the parliament, flags from every European country, officials rushing in and out in black cars. It feels like the center of the world. But walk a few blocks away and you'll find a country that feels oddly fragile. Politics here is messy, people don't even agree on what language should dominate. One side speaks Dutch, the other side speaks French, and there's also a small German speaking corner too. Belgium feels like two countries forced into one. And somehow, while it can't get its own house in order, it's expected to keep the European house standing. So, how did Belgium end up in this bizarre position? To answer that, we need to go back in time and look at how this country was built on division. Belgium is a young country by European standards. It only became independent in 1830. Before that, it was bounced around between different empires: Spanish, Austrian, French, Dutch. You name it, someone ruled over Belgium. And when Belgium finally got its independence, it wasn't built on unity. It was built on compromise, a compromise that's still haunting the country today. See, Belgium is basically made up of two big regions. In the north, you've got Flanders, where people speak Dutch or Flemish, which is their version of Dutch. In the south, you've got Wallonia, where people speak French. And here's the thing, these two regions couldn't be more different. In the early days, Wallonia was the rich part, the industrial engine, coal, steel, factories. Meanwhile, Flanders was poorer, more rural, more agricultural. So French was the dominant language, the language of the elites. But history flipped the script. By the mid 20th century, Wallonia's industries started collapsing. Flanders, on the other hand, modernized fast. It became wealthier, more high-tech, more productive. Suddenly, the once poor cousin was richer than the south. And with that came resentment. Why should Flemish taxpayers keep subsidizing Wallonia? Why should Dutch speakers feel like second-class citizens in their own country? Language laws became a battlefield. Street signs, schools, even hospitals all had to be negotiated between French and Dutch. And Brussels? Well, Brussels was the ultimate headache. A French-speaking island in the middle of Dutch-speaking Flanders, and somehow also the capital of the entire country. So what do you get when you mix two regions that don't really like each other, that don't speak the same language, that don't agree on who should pay for what? And then you try to glue them together into one country. You get Belgium. A state built on permanent tension, and those tensions don't just sit quietly in the background, they spill out into politics over and over again. Now, here is where the story gets even stranger, because while Belgium was busy fighting with itself over language and identity, Brussels suddenly became the capital of not just Belgium, but of Europe itself. How did that happen? Well, after World War II, Europe was in pieces. Countries like France and Germany realized that if they didn't tie themselves together, another devastating war could break out. So they created the first version of what we now know as the European Union. But here is the problem. Where do you put the headquarters of this new Europe? French Paris was too French. Bonn was too German. Rome was too Italian. Everyone wanted the honor, but no one wanted to hand that much symbolic power to just one country. And so they looked for a neutral ground, a small, not too threatening place in the middle of Europe, somewhere that wouldn't tilt the balance. Enter Brussels. At first, it wasn't obvious. The first meetings actually happened in Luxembourg. But Brussels, with its central location and its compromise country image, made more and more sense. By the 1960s, the European institutions were moving in and the city was transformed. Today, Brussels hosts the European Parliament, the European Commission, the European Council, and NATO headquarters too. In other words, decisions about war, peace, economics, trade, migration, they're all being made in a city where people can't even agree on what language to speak at home. When I walked through Brussels, you could feel that duality. One moment, you are standing in front of glass towers with blue EU flags fluttering. Everything feels polished, global, like the capital of the world. Then you turn a corner into the grand place. Cobblestones, old guild halls, chocolate shops, beer cafes. It's stunning, but it feels small, local, almost fragile. That's Brussels in a nutshell. A global capital on the outside, a divided country on the inside. And this dual identity doesn't just look odd, it makes governing Belgium nearly impossible. Because when you add global responsibilities on top of domestic divisions, you get a state that's constantly on the edge of a political breakdown. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Belgium's government, or should I say, Belgium's lack of government. Because here's the truth, Belgium is famous for being politically unstable, and not in the sense of coups or revolutions, but in the sense of sheer dysfunction. In most democracies where there's an election, parties form a coalition. They negotiate, and within a few weeks or months, you've got a government. In Belgium, that process can drag on for years. The world record was set here in 2010. After elections, Belgium went 589 days without a government. That's a year and 7 months. Imagine a country in the middle of Europe hosting NATO, the EU, surrounded by powerful neighbors, and for nearly 2 years, it didn't even have an elected government. And the crazy part, life kind of went on. Schools opened, trains ran, waffles were sold, the EU carried on. Belgium is so decentralized that regions basically run themselves. It's almost like the country exists on autopilot. Some Belgians even joked, maybe we don't need a government at all. Just keep the beer flowing, keep the fries frying, and we'll be fine. Here's the darker side. That paralysis means Belgium can't tackle big problems effectively. Issues like immigration, climate change, even economic reforms, they just get stuck in limbo, waiting for politicians to agree. And every time there's an election, the same thing happens. Flemish parties don't want to compromise with Walloon parties don't want to bow down to Flemish demands, so you get this political tug of war that never really ends. The Flemish North leans more conservative, pro business, even nationalist. Many want more autonomy, and some openly talk about independence. The French speaking South, more left leaning, more socialist, more dependent on subsidies. So when these two sides try to form a government together, it's like oil and water. They don't just mix. And yet somehow this fragile country keeps holding together, at least for now. But here is where it gets really interesting. While Belgium looks like a dysfunctional mess politically, economically, it's hiding a surprising amount of power. And this is where the story takes a turn. Here's the part that surprises most people. For a country that looks politically fragile, Belgium quietly punches way above its weight in the global economy. Let's start with Antwerp. This city is home to one of the biggest ports in the world, the port of Antwerp Bruges. It's a gateway for goods coming in and out of Europe. Oil, chemicals, cars, containers from China. A massive share of Europe's trade flows through here. And Antwerp isn't just about shipping, it's the diamond capital of the world. For centuries, rough diamonds have passed through Antwerp to be cut, polished, and traded. Even today, more than 80% of the world's rough diamonds still move through Antwerp's diamond district. That's not just jewelry, that's billions in global finance, investments, and power. Then you've got Belgium's pharmaceutical and biotech industry. Companies like UCB and Janssen are global players. In fact, Belgium is one of Europe's top exporters of pharmaceuticals, vaccines, medicines, biotech research. This small country is a quite powerhouse in life sciences. And let's not forget Belgium's soft power: beer, chocolate, waffles, fries. You might laugh, but cultural exports matter. Just like France is known for wine and Italy for pasta, Belgium's identity is tied to these foods. I can tell you, when I was in Brussels, grabbing a waffle on the street or tasting a local beer, it wasn't just delicious, it was identity. It was the kind of cultural branding that makes a small country memorable worldwide. But here's the paradox again: Belgium's economy is global, connected, and powerful, yet the politics are stuck in gridlock. The question is, what happens when this fragile state finally tips too far? What happens if Belgium breaks apart? So let's play out the big what if. What if Belgium finally collapses? This isn't some far-fetched idea. Flemish nationalists in the north have pushed for independence for decades. They argue, why should we, the wealthier region, keep subsidizing Wallonia? Why not just go our own way? If Belgium split, the most likely outcome would be Flanders breaking off, maybe even joining the Netherlands. Wallonia could theoretically lean towards France. The small German-speaking region, maybe it gets absorbed into Germany. Sounds simple, right? Well, not exactly, because the biggest question is, what happens to Brussels? Brussels is a French-speaking city surrounded by Dutch-speaking Flanders. It's also the capital of the European Union and NATO. If Belgium splits, Brussels would become a political orphan. Who would claim it? Would it become its own city-state like a European Washington DC, or would the EU and NATO be forced to pack up and move to another city? Maybe Paris, Berlin, or Amsterdam. And think about what that would mean. The symbolism alone would be enormous. The EU losing its capital would send shockwaves through the project of European unity. NATO too, having to uproot its headquarters at a time when Europe faces rising tensions with Russia. Belgium breaking apart wouldn't just be a domestic crisis, it would be a European earthquake. And yet, this possibility hangs in the background every time Belgium goes through another political stalemate. No one wants to push too hard because the entire European project is built on the assumption that Belgium, fragile as it is, will somehow hold together. So the question isn't just, can Belgium survive? The question is, can Europe survive if Belgium doesn't? So here is what we land. Belgium is a paradox, a country divided by language, history, and identity that somehow became the capital of Europe. A state that once went nearly 2 years without a government and yet is trusted to host the most powerful institutions on the continent. It's fragile, but it's essential. Weak at home, but strong abroad. When I walked through Brussels, I couldn't help but think this is Europe in a nutshell. A project built on compromise, on patching together differences, on making it work, even when it shouldn't. And maybe that's the lesson. Belgium isn't just running Europe. In many ways, Belgium is Europe, divided, messy, often frustrating, but still, against the odds, it holds together. The real question is, how long can it keep doing that? Because if Belgium ever falls apart, the ripple effects won't just be local, they'll shake the foundations of Europe itself. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments Do you think Belgium will hold together in future, or are we looking at Europe's most fragile state holding the fate of the EU in its hands?